We're Mega Game Age, and our technical presentation will center around the feedback-driven changes that have been implemented on the Visage site, which has been specifically designed for the visually impaired and blind community. Usability testing of the site had been in the back of our minds at the beginning, as Daryl had mentioned that he knew someone who would most likely be happy to test our site. Through usability testing, we aimed to find out how visually impaired and blind-friendly our site was, as we ourselves were not in the best position to judge this. We were looking for feedback on which parts of the site were easy to navigate, as well as which parts were difficult or confusing for screen reader users. We had a screen reader help section with heading level guides on the site, but we were also looking for feedback in terms of additions to that section. We created a usability testing task list, which was based on site functionality, and we tried to order the tasks in this list to be like a user story, as how a user would use our site in a normal session. Michael will now talk about the implementation of the usability testing.
I sure will. So the first step, of course, was getting ethics approval from the university. Once that was out of the way, Daryl, our client, hooked us up with a range of testers who were willing to give the site a go. Grace mentioned the task list that we put together, but since all of our testers live far from Hamilton, and we didn't want to sort of take the route of sending them some paperwork and getting them to fill it out and send it back, because that's sort of cold and impersonal, we decided to conduct the testing via Skype instead. This meant that we could collect a lot more information about how they were interacting with the site while they were doing it, and we could provide assistance as they went through the process in case of any problems. We also had someone logged in on the site to interact with them as they tested, and we had another person standing by taking notes to record what was said. Next slide. So the overwhelming response from the testing was positive. Everybody loved the site. They thought everything was easy to do and easy to understand. So that was a great big pat on the back for us. And we learned some interesting things from the process, from the testing itself and from the feedback that we got. When we went into testing, we expected all of our users to be experienced with screen readers, but this wasn't always the case. We had at least one tester who was learning to use the JAWS screen reader at the same time as learning to use our site. And this was useful for us, because we want to know that Visage is easy to use for people who are new to all of the technologies involved, as well as for people who are experienced. Another thing we learned was that we had to use different strategies for different types of testers. Older users were able to maintain a constant stream of information about what they were thinking and what they were trying to do, whereas younger testers were easily distracted and quite often had to be asked direct questions about what was going on. We also noticed, extra people coming into the room, we also noticed that the different testers themselves had different strategies when approaching a page. Older, more experienced testers would get a feel for the whole layout of the page and find out what was on it so that they could make the right choice about where to go. Younger testers just wanted to dive straight in and start clicking things. Both of these strategies were helpful for us because we could use them to identify issues concerning element layout and whether things were properly named and labeled and so on. Adrian and Ethan here have a more in-depth demonstration ready to show you the details of some of the things we learned.
The first bit of feedback we got from one of our testers, Darren, well, he's not actually called Darren, but we renamed him that for service identity, is that the site was really easy to use for him. But then later, when he went back and used the site again, he was instructed by Daryl to try and break it and see what he could break, and we're going to demonstrate what he could do and managed to figure out how to do now. Right now, we're in an edit page, and you can change passwords and everything, and in the path here, you've got the URL, and there's a number here, but if you change that to something else, it jumps directly onto someone else's page, and you can change their passwords and everything. So obviously, we wanted to fix that up. And how we did it was So what we really did was to open out the right thing. Basically, in the model view controller, application controller, it's the controller that gets called before every other controller and does everything. So if we add in this before filter for authorizing the user, then any method in the other controls, like this entity controller or the possibility controller, don't ask about running for that. Then a second authorized user will get called first, and what to do is to get the ID and check if it's either the session ID, which is the ID of the current logged in user, or if there's a group that has that ID and it's administered by the current user. And if it does, we added in this message here, don't be naughty, but tell them not to do that. And then we added in a few exceptions too for specific pages that we designed to. You've got to skip before filter for certain pages, like a show friends page, which is designed for showing your friends, so it has all the security stuff built into the page. So we want to skip the filter just for pages like that, and also adding friends and moving friend requests. So we're going to this stuff. And we'll go back to our current version. And if we click on the edit link, the edit page is still pretty much the same, but I'm going to change the value now to that one. Instead of letting you edit the stuff, it redirects you back and says, don't be naughty. So we've fixed that all up. Now Adrian's going to talk to us about some other issues.
Right, so some more feedback that we got from our testers was something that all the testers actually mentioned, and that was to do with redirections and notifications, and particularly in a couple of areas, and that was adding for friends on the search page, and actually pretty much anywhere, and sending private messages. So I'll give you a quick example while I'm talking about it. So on the broken version, if we go and search for friends here, we'll search for all users, and let's say we add Ethan as a friend. The page just gets refreshed, you lose the search results, you're not notified what's happened, the user doesn't know what's going on, they can't see, the screen reader's not telling them what's going on, and they're lost effectively, and it's really bad to be in that state. Similarly, I'll just quickly show you sending a private message, it's very much the same. Send it to Bob, and I'm put back on my profile page. I don't know if my message has gone through. At that time, I didn't actually have a facility to view our send private messages, so they had no idea until they got a reply if it actually worked. So to fix this up, we had to obviously find the actions that were being called when the users were doing these things. So for the add friend, that's our add friend action, so we'll just go find that. Here it is. And so the big issue here was this respond to part. So on a successful render of the page or submission of an action, we used to have a static redirect. We were just redirecting to the entity's URL, which was an index, basically our search page, no matter what happened, and it lost all of its previous parameters that were sent to the last request. Obviously that's not desired, we wanted to have a more informative redirect. So there was this Rails method called back, which automatically logs the last request, and you can call it at any point, and it will take you to that last request and send all the parameters in and basically set the state of that page back up as it was when you were last there. So that worked really well for that. Also, you'll see here checking if something's a user or group and constructing a message and just putting that message into the alerts, which we're rendering in the header on every single page. If there are anything in the alert array, which is a Rails global array, it'll just display that. So we're saying, you join this group or you send this person a friend request. A very similar thing happened in private messaging, we just used back. But something else happened as well with public messaging. If you are sending replying to a public message, if you're on a group's page and replying to a public message, what would happen after you submitted that request is it would redirect you to the person who you're replying to, not to the last place you were, which was okay until we put groups in. And so back wasn't going to cut it in that case, because just putting back in there would have sent you back to the page where you sent the message from, the create message page. So what we actually had to do was, similarly, we had to get into the application controller. And as Ethan mentioned before, the application control sits one level up. It's loaded before every other controller loads, and here the before filter, these actions will call on every single page request. So we made the store path method. Basically, we've declared a token to put into the session, and we're putting the referrer of the last request. So it's one level back. And so we can access this whenever we want. It's going to happen on every single action, so it's available anywhere. But obviously the places we don't want it to store are the places where we're actually using it. So if you do an action and it stores where you last were in that array, then you're going to send this, going to be the same as back, basically. So we can see that's put in here in the Popsicles controller. We're redirecting to session return to, and that just works absolutely fine. And we should be able to show you live here. If I search for a friend, bear with me. It's coming any minute.
Yeah, the server we're running it on currently is really quite an old one. Not that great, but
Okay, and it's coming. Alright, it's not coming. Alright, so I'll pass you on to Grace because that's taking forever. It works.
So these are some of the quotes that came out of our usability testing. So generally we had much more positive feedback than negative feedback. But the negative feedback that we did get, we used to make the site better. So that sums up the technical talk, and I hope you enjoyed the behind the scenes look at Visage, the social networking site designed for the blind and visually impaired.